Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webisode of All Politics Are Local. I'm WSAV Now reporter John Dowding. Every week, we take the time to break down some of those big headlines coming from Washington and Atlanta to see how it impacts us right here in the Coastal Empire. So today, as always, we're being joined by WSAV Washington correspondent Kelly Meyer. Hey, Kelly, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, John. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Thanks for hopping on. Had a lot of developments literally just right before we went on. We're talking about latest things we're seeing. We're hearing all about, the President-elect Biden's transition people that he's starting to transition people.
A lot of news there.
My mind is still not awake today on this Monday. He's starting to announce some of his cabinet picks, and we're
Yes.
also still hearing a lot of controversy around the certification of the state votes across the
Right.
country. I think today the big ones we're looking at are Pennsylvania and Michigan, but some news broke over the weekend here in Georgia that they finished and certified their votes from the general election. They certified that on Friday after they did an audit, which was initiated by the Secretary of State, and it was a hand recount. Now, the Trump administration is requesting another recount after one recount just took place. Just for perspective, this recount is different from the previous one because this one was requested by a candidate, whereas the other one was, carried out through the Secretary of State's office. And also, this recount is only done by machines, whereas the audit was a hand recount. So definitely some little differences here from these two different recounts, but it's a recount nonetheless. So Kelly, tell us, why is the Trump administration really trying to push and just try to challenge the results here in Georgia? I know they're within that margin for where they're allowed to request a recount. Obviously, the vote was just that close. But just tell us, what are you hearing? Why are they pushing for some of these lawsuits like here in Georgia?
Well, it's interesting because even really with this recount, it really won't be much of a difference or much of a change. I mean, they've said likely it's really not going to show any kind of new update or anything that we didn't already know. Many outlets, including the Associated Press, have already declared Georgia for Joe Biden. We're getting closer and closer, as you mentioned, with these different states certifying the elections. I believe Pennsylvania is next up today at noon, and that's a big state that, a lot of senators here on Capitol Hill are saying, with Pennsylvania certifying, there really is no other path. There really is no other option for him to get anywhere close to the presidency. So you've seen Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey, a Republican. You've seen Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican, coming out this weekend with statements, really essentially congratulating President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris and starting to move forward. But other members on the Hill I've heard from say they're going to wait until all the results are certified, until that final date when Congress has to officially accept. That's when they will wait until to do it.
And I think one of the big things too we saw in in the recount, the first recount, I should say, the first recount, and during the general election counting, tallying was, and this is something that's been happening across the country with a number of states, was counting the absentee ballots. Here in Georgia, they would go through the verification process of the signatures and all that kind of stuff ahead of election day, but election day is when they were legally allowed to count these absentee ballots. Now, we just learned this morning that the state elections board just implemented a new rule saying that counties can start counting those absentee ballots 8 days before the election. So, but something that this is just really going to impact is the runoffs in January with the Georgia Senate runoffs in January. And so, speaking of all of this recount stuff, talking about last week with the audit and everything, we heard some controversy with our senator from across the river here in Savannah in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. I know, Kelly, you spoke with Lindsey Graham and you covered that story last week where he was. I don't even want to say exactly what he was trying to say because again, I don't want to misconstrue anything. But Kelly, what was this controversy sort of about? What was this conversation that Lindsey Graham had with Georgia Secretary of State?
Basically, it was a conversation, I think it was about 2 Fridays ago now, that Senator Graham had with Georgia Secretary of State. And the news really kind of came out after our conversation last week, late Monday night. And, immediately reporters on Capitol Hill asked Graham what he meant by his conversation. So basically, how the Secretary of State took it was that Graham was asking him essentially to toss legally cast ballots. Graham was saying that was ridiculous, that he was just merely asking about the procedure, asking about the certification verification process, and if there were some inconsistencies, would they toss those or not count those? But a lot of people, he was getting scrutiny here on Capitol Hill because it was a South Carolina senator asking about a Georgia election process. We were on that call with Gabe Sterling in the Georgia Secretary of State office, asking him should a South Carolina senator be involved in such conversation, and he said, it's fine for anybody to ask questions, but at the end of the day, we're going to go by the law. We didn't actually personally catch up with Graham. We tried, and many reporters did. He just kept saying that the claims were ridiculous. That wasn't what he was asking the Secretary of State to do. But it really rattled the Hill. It rattled a lot of the senators, and a lot of Republican senators I reached out to, or congressmen on the House side from the state, didn't really want to comment on it. But we did talk to Congressman Buddy Carter on this last week, and we can play a little bit about what he had to say.
I find it hard to believe that any senator, much less Lindsey Graham, would threaten a Secretary of State.
So you just heard from Georgia Representative Buddy Carter speaking about that whole conversation that Senator Lindsey Graham had with Georgia Secretary of State. Now, like we said, they just announced this recount from the Trump administration. Their calls for a recount, I believe it was yesterday or late last night. Honestly, time is, I don't even know what time it is nowadays. So sometime within the last 24 hours or so. But, we want to switch gears here and talk about the latest with COVID-19. Obviously, we're seeing cases skyrocket across the country, particularly in the Northeast. And then also we are seeing in upper Midwest and places like North Dakota and those areas. And there's just greater cries really, for another round of COVID-19 stimulus relief. So Kelly, what is the latest you're hearing about that? I know I've been listening to various podcasts and various reports from some reporters in Washington. It just kind of seems like we're not sure. It just seems like even representatives on the Hill aren't sure what they want to do. So, I mean, Kelly, are we going to get another round of COVID-19 relief before the holidays?
I mean, another recess and another one gone by that we don't have a COVID deal. And I know we talk about this every week, and we've been talking about it every week basically since the last deal passed. When will the next one come? Especially as we reach the holidays, especially as the pandemic spikes, especially as people are still struggling. But, lawmakers left, the senators left last Wednesday night, the House left Friday with no deal, no compromise. And that was the big question. Will they reach it before the end of the year? One lawmaker told me he didn't think it would happen. He thought maybe let's break it down into smaller bills. Let's just do the Paycheck Protection Program, or let's just do help for schools or evictions or whatever it may be. So the thing is, there might be a possibility of getting something for COVID done in the spending bill. That is due on December 11th or by December 11th. That's the bill to fund the government, which they need to pass. They need to get something. So there's a way maybe to work it in there. And that's something I think I'm going to work on today for my story. So stay tuned for that. But we did talk with some lawmakers about the possibility of that happening. But yeah, it's just another holiday going by that Congress is not acting. And it's on both sides that, there's really no movement, Democrat or Republican. You can come at either side for not getting something done.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I remember hearing a conversation last week where Democratic leaders on the Hill said that they were having a meeting with Republican leaders on the Hill, Mitch McConnell, and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, and saying they were talking about a COVID relief bill. And everybody was like, "Oh, this is great!" And then they talked to Republicans, and they're like, "No, we're not." So
yeah.
it's just kind of, and especially here locally, a lot of people are suffering. A lot of people,
Yeah.
especially during the holiday season. Money's tight to begin with, and the holidays is always when you're spending a little bit more money. And especially with these rates going up with COVID, I think a lot of people just need some relief. I mean, some relief we're seeing is taking shape and taking form of some really positive outlooks from some vaccine candidates. We heard about the Pfizer vaccine, which was, I believe it's 95% effective. We heard about that a couple weeks ago. a week or two ago. Then we heard Moderna had the same thing as well, and now a new one this morning. So Kelly, what are we hearing on the Capitol Hill about, as we're hearing more about these vaccine candidates that are coming out? Also hearing Anthony Fauci saying we may be able to start distribution of this vaccine as early as December.
Yeah, then that's the good news, I guess, that we're hearing coming out of Washington, and again, also out of the UK, their vaccine research and updates looking positive out of there as well. But we talked with Secretary Azar, the Health and Human Services Secretary, on Friday, who basically said we could see this. The Pfizer vaccine applied for an emergency use authorization. As soon as that's cleared by the FDA, they could get this within 24 hours out to. First up, they're looking at essential workers, they're looking at healthcare workers, they're looking at the elderly. So he says within the next few weeks, this could potentially start going out and then available to the general public by April or so. So that's kind of the timeline we're looking at where regular people can get vaccinated potentially. And that was really big news. They say it won't cost anything to get, it won't cost anything to distribute or get out, and no one will have to pay anything for this, is what they're saying. And they're saying that it's 95% effective in preventing infection. So, they felt very hopeful about this, both sides actually last week. But of course, the administration was touting their accomplishments with getting this done so quickly. And they said they didn't cut any corners by getting this done quickly. It didn't compromise safety. He says if the FDA approves it, then this is safe to take. And we could play a little bit of what he had to say.
If everything goes according to our aspirations, given what we think the high quality of data is coming in from these trial programs, it could be within weeks that FDA authorizes the use of these vaccines. We will ship the product that we have within 24 hours. We are producing such that we expect to have between Pfizer and Moderna 40 million doses of vaccine by the end of December. So that's it's 2 shots per person. So that would be 20 million people, we believe, could be vaccinated by the end of December. And we'll just keep going at that type of rate or even higher levels of production into January. And we believe by the second quarter, across all the different vaccines that we've invested in, that by the second quarter of next year, we have enough for any American who wants to get vaccinated. But it's important to remember, we'll keep producing vaccine and spreading general vaccination availability throughout the winter into the spring.
And also talking about, you mentioned distribution. I was hearing from somebody from Operation Warp Speed and on one of the talk shows, and they were talking about how states are going to be the ones in control of this distribution efforts. But eventually it'll be something like where you go to your local pharmacy, Walgreens, CVS, and you just ask for the vaccine and you can get it. And I know there's been some talk about, the Pfizer vaccine having to stay at like extremely cold temperatures and you need 2 shots of it versus the Moderna one where it's more easily transported. But again, I think these are going to just be things that we're going to have to see how they develop in the next couple of weeks, especially with the FDA certification, because they could come back to one of these candidates and tell them no. So right. I think it's a lot that we're going to have to keep our eyes on for the next couple of weeks. But thank you, as always, Kelly, for sitting down and talking with us as the week gets on, so we know what we're looking ahead to, even though it's Thanksgiving week and nobody's on the Hill, but still stuff going on.
Always stuff going on, and we're always here to chat about it, John. Thank you so much.
Of course. You can see more Kelly stories on our website. Just go to WSAV.com/Washington, and you can catch up on previous episodes of All Politics Are Local on our website as well. Just go to WSAV.com/All Politics Are Local. Thank you so much again for watching. I'm John Dowding. We'll see you again next week on All Politics Are Local.